Culture is essential to us. As people's expectations are rising, it's getting harder to attract and retain great people. Rising and talented folks really want to work in a company that has a great culture. But our core values are a joke, said the VP of HR in a company I was working with. We've done the work to make them meaningful, real, and visible in our organization, but we still have so many examples of people who just aren't living them. I ask, what have you done? We spent 3 days as the leadership team in an offsite to refresh them. Our marketing chief put together a major communication campaign, including full swag, t-shirts, a really beautiful piece of artwork that was commissioned for the lobby that has them embedded in it. And we really know they need to work to up-level our culture, but we've been losing a lot of good people of late, and I'm pretty concerned. So how many leaders were put on a PIP or separated from the company as a result of the core values reveal, I asked. Hi, Lisa Jackson with Culture Pros here, where we help companies change for good, for the good of people, the good of the business, and the good of society. And this week, I want to talk about that exchange, which was a real exchange that I had with an HR leader, and what is the problem. I share this example not to make you think that core values are about firing people or that they are a leadership threat tool, but that really they are an anchor for the culture in your company, and your company will never be any better than how well you live the core values. So I'm going to share 3 simple ideas today that help you to firmly establish that anchor of core values in your organization so that they are a living, breathing testament to people's and your employees' experience. I've worked with hundreds of companies and leaders over the last 20 years in doing culture change work, and I've seen this common story play out over and over again. The company values are like window dressing for a handful of leaders who are getting amazing results in the organization. Often they're in sales or maybe in technology, but they're in some really critical role in the organization. And we think, oftentimes, actually, this is somebody with an ownership stake, and we think that if we declare the company values and we do a good job on the rollout, that their behavior will change. And I've never seen it happen, not one time. And so what happens then? They become meaningless. Core values are the ground rules, basically, for how people interact with each other. And just like in your family, writing a few ground rules on the refrigerator is not going to equal adherence. There have to be consequences and active communication that reinforces that this is real, this is how we treat each other, and why it's so important in our family. And your culture is like a family. So getting this right is really important. So let's start with number 1. Do they reveal the most essential desired behaviors in your company? So very often core values are things like respect, integrity, innovation, and they're these anchor words for a concept that is in the minds of leaders, but they are never translated into a doable behavior. So if you take respect, what does respect mean here? Does respect mean that we always sugarcoat the truth? That's how it looks in a lot of organizations. Assume positive intent in all interactions with people. That's behavioral. So that's a very concrete example of a core value that one of my clients adopted, and that was probably the biggest anchor for their culture. That if you're in a communication or a disagreement, the number 1 requirement or request or ground rule is that we assume positive intent on the part of the other person. The key with behavioral is that a person can act upon it, they can communicate based on it, and they can actually be measured based on their adherence to it. So if it doesn't fit those criteria, it's probably not in the behavioral realm. It's not okay to have 10 behavioral values or behavioral statements that go with some anchor like respect. You've got to really do the work to boil it down to what's most important here. So another good example is integrity. Integrity is a good one because what does it mean in behavior? So does it mean we always tell the truth even if it gets us in trouble? Enron certainly didn't have that one, nor do a lot of organizations that are a little slippery. So integrity Could mean that we be transparent in actions and decisions, and that's the way that we demonstrate through behavior integrity. Innovation is another common one that I see. Does that mean follow the rules until they don't apply? Does it mean think out of the box? Whatever that means. That's actually not a good behavioral example, in my opinion, because it's so cliche that it's become almost meaningless. Challenge the status quo. That's one you better think carefully about, because if you make that one real in your organization, you're going to have a Google type culture, and that might be really good, but it may be not something that you can live into or uphold easily in your organization. What about listen deeply to your customers for unsolved problems? That's a really cool one behaviorally around innovation, because it's where innovation comes from, is from listening to the unsolved needs of the people that you're serving. Number 2 is consequences. If leaders aren't given feedback when they violate a core value or the behavior that's associated with it, so if not following the core value is ongoing and repetitive and nothing is done about it, you will be like the HR person I cited at the beginning. Our core values are a joke. Your culture will never be more than lip service if that's the case, because so let me take a simple example to illustrate this. You've all seen the 2 or 3-year-old throwing the tantrum in the store, and as soon as they get the candy, what happens? They quiet down. So this is very parallel to what happens in organization, where core values are put up on the wall and they're pointed to, and maybe even mom reminds us of them from time to time, but there's absolutely no consequence for the violation of the behavior. And while that may sound harsh, it's just reality of how human beings work. We shape our behavior by the expectations of the tribe that we're part of and that we care about. And believe me, I have coached numerous leaders who were in career rescue mode for having not lived up to the expectations of their CEO in this regard. And change is possible. So you have to just demand that it's a condition of employment in your organization. One other little piece on this, that I don't want to overburden this part, but if you have a leader in a company who is abusive toward other staff people or any staff people in your organization, that person is controlling your employee experience, because the wake that they leave is far bigger than the direct people who report to them. And the stories, believe me, they're being told. So this is another reason to really understand how important it is to have the consequences in place. Define a process by which people receive honest feedback. Make sure that you have a process by which they can change, and that there is a timeline on that change, that it isn't just an extended, we hope you'll get better kind of situation. I have personally worked with a lot of companies who will never promote someone into leadership who hasn't already demonstrated they live the core values, not by their own admission, but by observation and feedback from the people that they've touched. So that's something that I think is a real stake in the ground for you to consider around core values. So then the third piece, so if the first piece is define them behaviorally, the second piece is make sure there are consequences. The third piece is really about the communication around them. Citing core values and key decisions is huge. So strategy shifts, change efforts, reward and recognition programs, hiring and firing, these are all really important places to cite your core values, and you can weave them into the communication seamlessly. A good Marcom person can do that for you, but it's a really smart way to show that they're real when the CEO and the executive team are talking about them. I've seen a lot of recognition ceremonies that give shout outs to people who cite the numbers, but they rarely talk about how that person did it and how they aligned with and reflected the company values. And that's a big missed opportunity in an era where everybody is so big on performance and culture, but the culture part is never cited. It's always about the performance. All right, so there's some good food for thought on your company values and how to bring them off the posters and make them as much walk as they are talk. Thanks for listening today. Please subscribe to our channel for more fun videos on culture and change, and we'll see you next time.